Hello, everyone. My name is Ian Brown, and welcome back to Titan Cinema Talk, the podcast started by gun high school students who have a passion for film. Look forward to our segments on analyzing movies, conversing with guest speakers, and deep diving into the world of film. Today, we have a very special episode with a very special guest. This is someone I've known, I would say, since middle school. He was in my mom's Bible study group, and this is Dr. Solomon Hughes. He's playing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in HBO's Winning Time, The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty, which is about how the Los Angeles Lakers became the most successful professional basketball team in the 1980s. Co-stars include Quincy Isaiah, John C. Reilly, Sally Field, Adrian Brody, Molly Gordon, Jason Segel, and more. Welcome, Solomon. Thank you for joining me here.
Thank you for having me, Ian. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into these questions. So first off, what was your occupation before this, and how did you get into acting?
So I'd worked in the realm of education for a little over a decade. I worked at Stanford for a number of years. Before that, I was doing my PhD at the University of Georgia, but I also had a position on campus at the same time. And so ironically, I'd left Stanford and I was in the process of repositioning myself in the realm of education and looking for teaching jobs, because at Stanford, I was working in the administration in the graduate school, and I was teaching on the side. I lectured in the Graduate School of Education, and I taught a few undergrad courses. And I knew that my passion was teaching. The administrative stuff was fine and all, but I really was passionate about teaching. And so my plan was to leave Stanford and spend a few months writing and applying for faculty gigs. And about a month after I left Stanford, a casting agent reached out to me and let me know that they'd been doing this global search for the role of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And, I tell people, when the opportunity came my way, I was just thrilled to get the opportunity to audition. Right after I graduated from college, I actually moved down to LA, and I had two goals. I was going to train for a future professional basketball career. And I also was going to try to learn as much as I could around about the world of acting. And I had a number of friends who had been former athletes who had transitioned into the acting world. And so it was a space that I was intrigued by. And even my intrigue, it precedes that. Growing up, I grew up in a family where we would see one of our relatives on TV. So Ethel Ayler, who was a Broadway actress and also portrayed Claire Huxtable's mother on The Cosby Show. Her grandfather and my great-great-grandfather were brothers. And so while I never met her, my mother would always say, "You're related to that person. You're related to that person." And so she was one of many, artists or performers and musicians that I really just admired growing up and had this family connection to. And so, in addition to that, just film and TV. I tell people my favorite thing about the era of DVDs was listening to the director's commentary. It was often the case that I would listen to the director's commentary more than I would actually watch the film. And I'll never forget, I drove a girlfriend crazy doing that. But I was fascinated with just how, the thinking behind the process, how all these different things came together, just, all of the details about the production. So, again, fast forward to 2019, when this came my way, I was just thrilled to get the opportunity to audition because, again, I was very interested in the space. And an audition, at the very least, it's feedback, right? And so, I had a former college teammate who's been acting for 20 years and has a really cool career. He's been a lead in a Tyler Perry film. He's done a lot of sitcoms. He was a lead in a film with Jim Gaffigan right before COVID. And he's an incredible actor. And so he read with me when I did my self-tape. So I send the self-tape in, and it was about 5 days later, I get a call that they're going to fly me down to do an in-person audition. And so, I flew down to LA, did the in-person audition. It was rigorous as all get out. I was thrilled to meet Adam McKay. I saw the call sheet and I knew he was going to be in the room. And I knew Max Borenstein, Kevin Messick, Francine Messler, but Adam McKay, I'm an enormous Adam McKay fan. I'm just, whether it's the comedic stuff or the social political commentary stuff, I just love everything he does. And so for me, honestly, just getting the chance to do an in-person audition I just saw every step I just saw as a win. I was like, no matter what happens, I'm not going to think past today. I'm just going to really immerse myself in this moment and enjoy what's happening. And so, yeah, went down, did the in-person audition, and it was like an hour and a half of just rep after rep after rep. You do the one,
Wow.
do the scene, and they said, now do it like this way, do it this way, try this, and then we did some improv at the end. And I'm like, I was just emotionally, physically, mentally spent. But found out, I guess it was like 6 days later that I got the part, and the world changed. So
Yes, it definitely did. I've been seeing all the stuff from your social media about like going to premieres and doing promos and stuff. I'm sure like just being immersed in this industry has just been insane.
yeah.
So for Kareem, what was it like to get into the process of getting into his head and being this
Yeah.
person?
It's one of the most rewarding research projects that I've ever engaged in, for sure. I've written a dissertation, I've written research papers, but this was like a total labor of love, in large part because I grew up a fan of the Lakers, and specifically a fan of Kareem's, because of what he represents. Right, he represents multi dimensions. You see a 7'2" Black man who's great at basketball, and you kind of get seduced or sucked into just that one dimension of him. But obviously, he's done so much more as a social activist, as a writer, as a political, as a producer, as an actor himself. Right, he's done so many different things, and so. Yeah, it was. I feel like one of the things that I love about the craft of acting is you get proximate to somebody else's experience, right? It really creates an opportunity for you to empathize and really kind of get as close to somebody else's experience. Obviously, you're not going to walk in their shoes, but you can, you're learning so much about what makes them them. And so the process, I really, when you think about his life, he's been influential in so many different decades, so many different eras. So, I wanted to know as much as I could about him. And we're fortunate because we live in the YouTube era. So
Yeah.
I was able to watch a ton of game footage. So just kind of looking at his mannerisms, how he operated, how he moved, and then how he shows up in interviews. That was really helpful. And the other thing is, I think one of the advantages that I have amongst this cast is I'm portraying someone who literally produced a documentary about themselves, and so that was super helpful, obviously, to watch that. But I'd been reading stuff about Kareem since I was a kid. His autobiography, Giant Steps, is one of the first big books that I read growing up in Riverside, California. But yeah, so again, learning as much as I could about him, but I also wanted to learn about the ecosystems, the places that made him. So he's from Harlem, right? He obviously was in Los Angeles in the 70s and the 80s, et cetera. And so jazz music is very important to him. I think at one point he owned a jazz label. I think you might want to fact check that, but I think I read that somewhere. And I'm a huge fan of that genre of music. And I actually have, just like Ethel Ayler, I'm related to a famous free jazz artist who passed away in the late 70s, Albert Ayler. But that genre of music has really been central to who I am. And so to kind of really re-immerse myself and learn as much as I could about this genre of music that so heavily impacted who he is. I mean, when you think about just how fascinating of an individual he is, as a teenager, he knew Thelonious Monk, who was like one of the greatest jazz minds in the history, or one of the greatest music minds ever, right? And Kareem was like on first name basis with this man. So it's just learning as much as I could about him, his surroundings, the things that he loved and appreciated. It's all very, very rewarding.
Wow. And were you actually given the chance to meet Kareem at any point?
No, haven't had the chance to meet Kareem. I've been in the same room as Kareem. It was when I was in high school. We were playing in a basketball tournament, and his son and I are around the same age. Both played basketball, and I'll never forget. We were at Cal State Dominguez Hills, and we were like right in front of the gym. Kareem was you could tell he was just waiting for his son to finish his game. And it was one of those things where he's this giant human that is so incredibly talented at basketball, and everybody's kind of just in awe. Like no one, people gave him his space. Nobody like crowded him. But I just remember sitting back, just being blown away. My younger brother got to meet him, but I've not had the chance to meet him. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully you get that chance.
Yeah.
It would be really cool.
Yeah.
So I know you were talking about like that. There was so much more to Kareem than just basketball. There was a lot going on with him. And for this show, do you think we're going to get to deep dive into that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the book that it's based on really it covers like a decade or more, right? Of
Mm,
just this the rise of this dynasty and all the seasons that went into kind of creating this incredible record, or just incredible like streak of wins. And so yeah, so this it's going to be fun for viewers to kind of go along this ride, because episode one, it's just the beginnings. It's a brand new owner in Jerry Buss, and when you think about his background, it's just fascinating. Coming from Wyoming and then essentially changing the sports world. It's his
mm,
first year as an owner. It's Irvin Magic Johnson's first year in the league. It's Larry Bird's first year in the league. And people that know about basketball know that prior to Magic and Larry Bird's rookie season, basketball had fewer viewers on TV than golf and bowling. Right? It just was not. When we think about the game today,
wow.
it's an immensely popular game. It's a global game. But at the time, they were fighting to get on TV. And so when Larry Bird and Magic Johnson come into the league, they just infuse it with a new kind of energy. And obviously, underneath that was the racial contrast, the white, the black. And so because of that, it was like, literally steroids into the NBA's arm. And so yeah, so I mean, episode one is just the beginning, right? And you see the development of the relationships of the rookie and the vets, this owner who's kind of trying to find his way, and all the cultural stuff that's happening in that era, right? The story, it talks about sexism, it talks about racism, it talks about class, right? And so just the 80s is, I think the 80s is one of those decades that gets lost in the shuffle. The 60s, everybody talks about the 60s, right? The 80s kind of gets just lost in the shuffle. And my theory is it's the Reagan era, and there's this perception that everything was good, and that couldn't be further from the truth, right? Things were literally
Yeah.
falling apart. When you think about the LA riots, right, in the early 90s, I mean, the 80s were essentially like the final, like the last part of the runway until the city essentially exploded. And so yeah, so I mean, this story. The hope is that we're able to get multiple seasons and tell more and more of the story. But yes, this is episode 1 and 2 are really just the beginning.
Mm. Yeah, I'm hoping for more seasons as well. I mean,
Yeah.
from what I've seen so far, it's been really amazing, and it's a really unique show, especially how they just show everything, especially with editing and cinematography
Yeah.
here. So
Yeah. They packed a lot in.
yeah, they did. And with your previous basketball experience, was it easy to um, do be doing all these basketball scenes and recreating games and stuff like that? And were you trying to do like some of Kareem's signature moves, like the sky
Oh,
hook? And
for sure. I mean, I think you obviously you can't play this part unless you make some effort to learn the skyhook, right? When you think about
right,
the skyhook, it's
yeah,
you know, I'll preface it with arguably, but I feel like you don't even really need to argue this. It's the most unstoppable offensive move in the history of the game, right? And when you think about the fact that Kareem is the all-time leading scorer in the history of the NBA, and he primarily only shot that, right? And it's a two-pointer, right? He shot, I think, like three-pointers in his career. So he holds
wow,
this Mount Everest record, only essentially shooting 2-pointers and that one move. And so, I feel like that's, so, but and in terms of whether or not it was easy, I will say I played college basketball years ago, like nearly 20 years ago. And so getting back into basketball shape, losing the weight to look more like an 80s basketball player, because at the NBA now, people are a little bit bulkier. Strength training is more of a component of today's game, whereas in the 80s,
right,
not so much. It wasn't as physical. I mean, it was physical, but just in a different way. Like the people were
right.
very, very physical, but just they weren't also, hitting the weight room every single day, essentially. So it was very, very challenging. But also rewarding. It's like, I was getting paid to get in really good shape, and again, just try to mimic just the incredible artistic moves of this basketball player.
And for those basketball scenes, what was it like to actually be doing those scenes? Because it's not like a just a regular game, right? You obviously have the
All right,
camera on the
for
court with
sure.
you.
Right. I mean, it's in what I think a lot of us had to adjust to, and I think it was a pretty quick adjustment. It's like we were playing basketball to fit within a story, and
Mm,
so the basketball has to help the story, right? Otherwise, it's
right.
just a waste of time. And so the choreography, everything had to be on point. I think like having played ball, when you're just practicing with your team, you're only worried about you and your teammates. But in this scenario, everybody has to be in sync. Defensive players, offensive players, referees, coaches, etc. Everything has to move as one. And so all those details, it was challenging for sure. And just it's kind of like Max Bornstein, the showrunner and one of the executive producers, always talked about how essentially everything within the production of these shows is a trust fall. The cast, the crew, the stunt coordinators, the camera people, everybody's trusting everybody to do something that pushes the story along. And so, yeah, there essentially were no off days, because the days that we weren't filming, we were typically working on the basketball choreography, because we want it to be hyper realistic, right? And so we, obviously, and when you're talking about the Showtime era, it was a style of basketball that was just so massively appealing, and so yeah, it was difficult for sure, but we were surrounded by incredible people, incredible support systems, teachers, trainers. Like I said, the writers would often visit the court and kind of talk to us about what we were trying to, craft together, essentially. So,
and wasn't I think Rick Fox, wasn't he like one of the
Rick Fox
trainers?
is one of the advisors. He trained Quincy Isaiah, and obviously Rick Fox had an incredible professional basketball career, played with the Lakers. So it was incredible having him around for sure.
And so you got to talk to like a lot of former players or current players like during this time.
Yeah, so there was production. There were a number of very highly skilled former basketball players, guys who were like professional basketball players but had some free time, and so they were serving as kind of like background or in some instances like stunts, right? Whether it's an alley-oop, etc. Like there was a number of incredibly talented, very, very competitive actors who were part of this production, and so that was actually also one of the other highlights of this experience, was getting to spend time with guys that know the game well, have their own like hoop stories and so on.
Right. So going back to this industry, what was it like to just be immersed into this, into be able to actually work on a show? And this is also your acting debut, and also Quincy Isaiah's acting debut, who plays Magic. So what was it like for you?
So Wood Harris, who I think a lot of people would say he's one of the greatest actors of our era. And Wood Harris he played Avon Barksdale in The Wire. He was Julius Campbell in Remember the Titans, which is, I think, one of the greatest sports films ever. He's in, Wood's been in so many different things. Paid in Full, Above the Rim. It's just being on set with someone like Wood is fascinating, because he's worked with Denzel Washington. He worked with Tupac Shakur, right? Like just the eras that he's been in, the different people that he's been a part of it. And The Wire, it's The Wire, outside of our show, I think it's the greatest show that's ever come on TV. I'm an enormous fan of The Wire, and he was obviously an essential part to that. But he would always say, Solomon, this is a masterclass. This is a masterclass, what you're experiencing right now. Soak this up, lean into the conversations, and just be a sponge. And I mean, it was, man, it was, I will use the word blessing, because that's exactly what it was. I mean, just to be in a space where the people that they brought together to put this together, I mean, they come from like award-winning backgrounds. And so being immersed in it, because there's a part of me that, for sure, this being my first production, was maybe feeling a little bit insecure, like maybe I need to go back and get an MFA or something like that, right? And I'm not ruling that out, but what the veteran actors would say to us is, you're literally taking the masterclass right now. This is like HBO is putting all their resources into this, and so there's ample opportunities to learn. And so and everybody was, again, so generous. The writers, like, if you ever want to come to the writing room, we'd love, if you ever want to come to the editing room, just to kind of see how all the pieces come together. It was it just as immersive and as educational as anything I've ever been a part of.
And for everything in post and doing promos and stuff like that, what was that like?
I feel like the promotional stuff, it's an opportunity to get the word out about this project, you know, and having been a part of this project and seeing how hard everybody worked, right? And just the massive cast and some of the performances, many, I mean, not all the performances, like being able to kind of serve as an ambassador to help get people's eyes on this story. You know, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and it's been intense for sure. I mean, we've done, especially in the era of COVID, our press junket days are like nonstop. And so, it's intense, but it's also a blessing because we get to get people's eyes on this, on all of these stories. Cause it's obviously, it's this one story about this organization, but within that, there's so many different things. And I feel like, yeah, I've approached it with a lot of gratitude and gratefulness for being, you know, pegged as someone to serve as an ambassador to get people to pay attention to this project. But overall, I would say it's been fun, you know, just reflecting on it, thinking about it. You know, the premiere was incredible because it was like a reunion. There were a number of people that I hadn't seen in a while. I mean, I've done some press stuff with Quincy, so I've been able to see him, and he's, you know, Quincy's like family to me now. So, but there were other actors who I hadn't seen in a while, so it was really fun to see them. And Rodney Barnes, one of the executive producers, you know, he talks about, he's like, Solomon, during this whole process, there's these seasons. There's the grind season where you're putting it together, and there's the reward season where you're celebrating everything that we did together. That's essentially the season that we're in right now. So.
Yeah, rewarding indeed. I mean, a lot of work went into this, and it shows. It really shows from the episodes that have come out so far. So I'm definitely excited to see what's coming up next. Mm-hmm. And for these episodes, there's 10, right?
There's 10.
10 episodes, and I know there's a bunch of different directors that are working on each episode. So I know Jonah Hill is one of those, right? He directed the second episode.
Episode 2. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like to be working with all these different directors?
You know, I've read something the other day that said, you know, ease is a greater threat to your growth than challenges are. And obviously with different directors, people are bringing in different perspectives, different styles. And so learning to adjust and work with the, you know, different styles, different perspectives. You know, I think it really just expands and broadens your own, it can expand and broaden your own perspective. So yeah, for me, it was, you know, I relished having had that opportunity because they're just seeing the different approaches. You know, again, going back to what Wood talked about, is it's like a masterclass opportunity where you're seeing all these different approaches, people coming from different backgrounds, some with comedic backgrounds, some more dramatic, some more action. It's fascinating. In a word is how I'll describe it. It was fascinating. And I imagine for the directors, it's somewhat of a challenge because you're coming into something that's, you know, somewhat already established, right?
Right.
And so there's give and take on both sides in terms of how much, you know, how much you're adjusting as a director, how much actors or performers are adjusting to your style. So it was fascinating. You know, I feel like I would say it's not for the faint of heart, because I think just the adjustments are going to be a challenge, right? And I feel like you can't get shut down by that, right? You have to be able to figure out, how am I going to put out the best performance? You know, what are the things I need to do to be the best performer, right? And a lot of it is, you know, just kind of recalibrating every time. Well, I wouldn't say recalibrating, but with directors, just, you know, not losing yourself, being clear about what you need to do, you know, to be your best, et cetera. And I will say all the directors did a great job of spending time with us, you know, from behind the camera, just talking about themselves, but also kind of shaping for us what their vision was with what they were trying to accomplish.
And my last question is, now, given your new experience, what advice would you be giving out to actors who are auditioning for the first time or trying to get into this industry?
Yeah. So Philip Seymour Hoffman, there's advice that I've heard from Philip Seymour Hoffman and Viola Davis. And it's Philip Seymour Hoffman, I'm paraphrasing, but it was essentially, relish every opportunity you get to act, every opportunity. If you're starting out doing stuff in the background, starting out doing stuff as an extra, like every opportunity is an opportunity to learn. And I feel like the psychological ups and downs, I feel like you have to lean into being honest about what those might be like for you, because it's an industry where there are a lot of no's, and what I say to people is kind of like, a no can crush you, or it can just serve as a little bit of a redirect, where
Right.
you hear it and you're like, okay, maybe what can I do a little bit differently to get where I'm going. And so I would just say, like, man, and I feel like there has really been this movement to incorporate into the world of education, helping students be okay with failure. But there's a part of me that doesn't believe they really believe that, right? Because it's still very scary. But I think,
Right.
I feel like the reality is, man, in this realm, is you have to be okay with failure, because that's where when you're stepping out and doing something uncomfortable, or where you're really stretching yourself, right? That's where you're learning, right? I mean, I feel like I learned so much from the self tapes and the auditions that where I just got the straight up no, right? Then well, I'm not gonna say I learned more, but I would say I learned a lot. So I would just say, don't be shattered by the no's, and be intentional about finding opportunities and spaces to perform, right? To connect with other people who have similar goals. I think one of the other things that I've told people about, like, my journey is, I'm 6'10", and I've had a number of people, over the years tell me, when I've expressed an interest in this field, oh man, you'd get typecast right away. Like, there's there's nothing for you. I literally had a friend whose brother shot short films years ago. I really loved what he was doing, and I inquired, very polite, like, I really love what he's doing. I'd love to, maybe get an audition or something. And he laughed in my face and said, yeah, sure. Whenever we cast a 6'10" Black dude, I'll let you know. And just kind of like, just brushed me off.
Mm.
And that could have crushed me, right? And that could have redirected me to something else. But the reality was, like, I'm not going to let somebody else's small view of what somebody should look like or how somebody should present themselves, like, determine what I want to do, right? Like, if the desire is real in your heart, you're not going to be crushed by no. So I would say that just relish every opportunity you get, and be intentional about finding a good community of people who also are passionate about this space. And the other one was, Viola Davis talked about, making a decision between whether you want to be famous or you want to get good at the craft. And I just think it's such a brilliant point to make, because the craft, acting, like, when I think of everything I've done professionally, being on a set where you're surrounded by people and cameras, and you've developed the ability to turn all that off and completely be locked into another human, and be on this journey with another human, like, literally just be completely tied and active listening to everything to build something, to make something. I don't know that I want to do anything else in my life ever again. Like this, it was like a drug, right? Especially, I mean, in this era of smartphones, where we're always distracted, like, being locked into another human or another set of humans and making art together. Like, it's just a wonderful thing. And I feel like that is, there's no comparison to, like, just that richness to just being famous, getting a bunch of followers on social media, and, et cetera. So I would say, decide very early on whether or not, and really be honest with yourself. Am I trying to get famous, or am I really trying to get good at this craft? So.
That's really, really good. That's really good advice. And I love that last part. That's really something to think about. All right. Well, that's pretty much all we had for questions.
Right.
So, Solomon, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. I know how busy this time is for you, so I really appreciate this.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I'm glad that you were persistent in trying to make this happen. I mean, when I think back on my high school self, I will say I was the kid. My life was so consumed by basketball. I had so much admiration for people who were in theater, but I just was, I was hesitant to ever put myself out there. And so I mean, yeah, this is an exciting time for folks your age in terms of just all the,
Yeah.
when you think about all the new platforms and different opportunities that there are to perform, I just feel like I'm happy to, lend any insights or from my experience. So,
All right. Well, you can catch Solomon Hughes on Winning Time on HBO Max Sundays at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And I really recommend checking out the show. You can learn a lot from it. Definitely can learn a lot from it. So thank you again, Dr. Solomon, and we'll see you next time.
all right.